I guess to start this off with, I kind of gave a very high-level interview of who you guys are. Give us a little bit, I think both Oklahoma State grads, is that right? Ish?
Sort of.
Okay, well, tell us the background.
Yes, we are both graduates.
Okay.
My undergraduate degree is actually from OU. I got my graduate degree at it.
Boomer.
So I can go either way, but on football days, I'm sorry, I'm wearing.
There's certain part of bios that I absolutely leave out, and that was definitely one of them. I was like, we'll just stick with it. But OU, and then Okay. Good. And David?
OSU.
OSU? Okay.
Oh, sorry. That would help.
That would
really help.
There we go. So you guys went from Oklahoma State. What was the first job after Oklahoma State, or after?
So I actually went to work for a company called Seagate Technology here in Oklahoma. That was here at one point in time. Seagate was the third largest private employer in Oklahoma, and I started there as an engineer. Did that for a few years. Had a couple of other startups that I worked with, but that's how I got started.
Very nice.
Born and raised.
Yeah, my background, I got out of OSU. I was going to go East Coast or West Coast. That's my wife had decided that. And then somebody goes, "Hey, my dad works over at Ditch Witch. You want to go over there and interview?" I went, "Sure." So it wasn't very strategic, but I went over there and there was something weird about it. I said, "I can't explain it, but I want to work here." So I was there 22 years and was CEO the last 7 or 8 years I was there.
And what was the role that you started at Ditch Witch?
It's just called a factory rep, which basically means you live here in Oklahoma, but they give you a plane ticket to a different part of the U.S., and that was your territory, if you will. So you go out for 2 weeks, including the weekend, come home for 2 weeks. Go out for 2 weeks, come home for 2 weeks. It was very rigid. You couldn't come home on a Friday night. You had to come home on a Saturday. They were afraid you were going to come home too early or something. So it was very old school, very rigid. Thankfully, I was young at that time. I wouldn't do that now, but and God bless my wife. She took care of the family and the kids while I was doing that little trip for a number of years.
And you said both of you originally from Oklahoma, right?
Yep, born and raised.
What towns? No, not for you. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you were actually born in Germany, but lived a lot in Enid. I was born in War Acres, so Oklahoma City, basically, central Oklahoma.
Nice. Very nice.
I'm an Air Force brat, so born in Germany, moved all around.
Any other Air Force? That's
cool.
Nice. Yeah, very nice. And so between the Ditch Witch, between moving around and the last, you said 6 years that Ditch Witch was CEO, is that right? Was that kind of the beginning of seeing, hey, I want to be able to talk about leadership? The other book you did, it was what, art negotiating or networking and beyond the handshake, right? Which networking is something we've talked about on the show multiple times, and how important it is. So were you seeing things within those connections that you were making with Ditch Witch and the deals that you were making, how important that networking was, and kind of already thinking that you wanted to be putting together books at some point?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I was voted shyest boy in school up in Enid, Oklahoma. About 1,500 kids. All the girls voted who's the shyest boy in school. So I was that. And then, so I realized, took me a little while, I figured out, David, that's not a personality flaw. It's just a skill you don't have. So I started working on, I got to learn this skill. So I watched other people. I still watch people in a crowd, who does what, how do they gain conversations. And so I started working on it. And over the years, I got decent at it, where somebody goes, "Hey, would you come speak to our group about that?" I'm like, "Sure." I'm very off, kind of like this thing. You just ask and I go, "Sure." Anyway, I did that for a few years, and finally goes, "You got to write a book." So that's where the book came from. But I think the reason it's important is because I like that story in particular, because to me it tells you that if you're not good at something, don't view it as a personality flaw. View it as like, that's a skill I need to go learn, right? And so as you go through the day and all these great speakers you're going to have, if there's something you're uncomfortable with, just like, okay, if you want, you say, I want to learn that skill, whatever that may be. And that's still serving me pretty well to this day.
That's really great. And then what was the point that brought you two kind of together?
So I was, as I moved up in my career, I was an engineer for about 15 years, and then started moving up into leadership and management roles. And immediately before joining Magellan, I was with MD Building Products. Remember with the big yellow and black caulking tube on 235? That was my world for several years.
Extension South Bridge, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay. And I was running all operations there. And one of our board members was also on the board of Ditch Witch. And so he introduced us, 5 years before we ever started working together. And so we had known each other. And then when I left MD and was just doing some consulting on my own, we actually intersected on a client, and that was 18 years ago now. And so we're like an old married couple in a lot of ways, right? We can finish each other's thoughts and those sorts of things. I know where all David's bodies are buried. I don't think he knows where mine are, but I know all those. But that's how we started working together. It was just sort of really coincidental.
That's fantastic. And was that with Magellan in mind of this is what we want to do in the future, or was it we just started working together and we just?
Yeah, it was interesting. It's interesting kind of how that all evolved. And when we first started working together, we were doing primarily strategic planning, helping organizations with strategic planning. And what we realized after doing several of those, we would help an organization with strategic planning, but we'd look at the room or the people in the room and we would think to ourselves, I'm not sure they've got the leadership to pull this off. And it almost felt in some ways like, okay, are we stealing from people that we're giving them, helping them with this stuff that they're not going to be able to execute? And so we decided, well, we'll just start moving into coaching. And so we started moving into executive coaching at that point and doing a lot of that. And then we evolved from there into doing leadership workshops and development programs and those sorts of things. And it really has just evolved over time. But it all started fundamentally with just strategic planning and the outgrowth of that.
I think a key part of this was Brent and I were at a point in our careers before we left and started doing this. I think we both recognize the value of getting everybody on the same page, having great leaders. I was at Ditch Witch and we were doing $120 million a year for many, many years. When I became CEO and a team, 8 or so of us, we'd kind of grown up together. None of us had the same last name as the owner of the business. So we're fairly expendable. We've got to figure out how do we get this thing beyond 120 million. And that's where I became really a student of strategy and how to get a team, 1,600 employees, how to get them all on the same page. And it was through that process we took it from 120 million to 350 million in about 5 years. And that's when I really fell in love with strategy of how do you get everybody on the same page. And but if you think about strategy in most organizations, at the most you're going to do it once a year. And I'm like, man, I'd love to do that every day. So that's what caused me to leave a pretty golden handcuff job and take a risk and start doing something on my own. And fortunate enough to meet my brother Brian.
What I've liked about the Magellan team in the building that I currently work in, I had seen them online. I had seen the posts that both of these gentlemen had made on LinkedIn, and I really was fascinated by it. I was like, these guys are compiling a list of, or recruiting more so, some absolutely fantastic leaders from the Oklahoma City area. And I mean, absolutely fantastic. If you go on the Magellan website and you look at the people that are under kind of that Magellan umbrella, you're going to recognize many names.
Our most recent one was Jack Stark, who was president of Continental for many, many years. And what happens is they retire, but they're not tired, right? They still want to work. They still want to get involved in things. And so we're a very good landing spot for that because when they join us, it's sort of like, okay, how much do you want to work and what do you want to work on? And so we can kind of guide them in that way. There's others like Mick Cornett. There's Bruce Lawrence, who's run all of Integris for Oklahoma. So it's some pretty, and they work anywhere from 10 to probably 40 hours a month is probably the average of all the 32 executive partners.
So we definitely want to get to some of the lessons from the book, and I want to echo Drew's statements. The book is fantastic. I am not a reader at all. Somebody made the comment. Yes, I made the comment that I read a book yesterday, and somebody congratulated me on the fact that I was able to make it through a book. But This is,
Just so
it's
you know,
such,
Brent makes fun of me too. I just listen to Brent and I repeat it.
but it is such an easy read, but the lessons in it are absolutely incredible. So don't think that we're sitting up here just trying to hawk a book. Like, this is a book that is truly valuable. It has fantastic stories, has fantastic lessons in it. So definitely check that out. And we want to talk about that, a couple of those in a second, but I'm going to throw a question at you guys that I didn't give you ahead of time. And the question is this, is that talking about leadership, people don't typically come out of college and they become the CEO day one, right? You have to work yourself up to that. And so for people who are either early in their career or they're mid-stage in their career, and they really have that ambition to be able to go up that ladder, first of all, and this is a challenging question to pose to yourself, is does everybody have that capacity or that ability to hit that CEO spot? And that's the first part. Second part being, if they do, if they want it, how do they get it?
Yeah. So you want me to take that one? So it's interesting. Simon Sinek. Anybody ever heard of Simon Sinek?
Yep.
Great leadership author. In one of his talks I saw him give, he talked about that very thing. And his comment was, leadership is sort of like parenting. Okay. Everybody has the capacity to be a parent. Not everybody wants to be a parent. Not everybody is necessarily suited to be a parent, right? But leadership is the same way. So it's a skill, it's a muscle that you can exercise and learn. Now, I do think, to your point, there are some that are probably more suited to that CEO role. There are some fundamental gifts and skills. Not to say you couldn't learn that skill, but it might be easier to come by it naturally. But I think everybody can rise to that spot. And so my advice would be, if you're interested on that, start focusing on your leadership, because I never learned that in college, and I've got 2 graduate degrees, and I think maybe I had 1 3-hour course on leadership, and yet you get into the work world, you're really good at what you do, and you get promoted to lead people who are doing what you do, and no one really teaches you very well how to do that, right? And it's a different set of skills that it takes to be successful there. And so you just have to be intentional about it. Read everything you can get, watch podcasts, get the experience, lead a team, lead a project, volunteer, do those sorts of things. But it's just like building a skill, just like anything else.
Awesome. If I can follow that up for a second. So the other day, and I am pretty active on LinkedIn. I don't know why, but I enjoy it. And a lot of times people will look at me and go, man, you're really lucky. And they'll look at my resume, I guess, and say, man, you're really lucky. And it really causes me to really think about, yes, I am lucky, but I created a lot of that luck, I feel like. And so I put a post out there, and it was just my own, I think I call it my quiet hack for a successful career. And number one was do the work nobody else wants to, year after year after year. So it's not I was young when I became CEO, but still I worked my butt off for many years before I became CEO. I think the other one was be a calming effect. So I like trying to, if I walk into a room, my goal is to be not just me be calm, but bring low stress to the room. And so I've got several others, but it's those kind of skills I learned that I still practice.
I remember that one because the final one said, like, your job is the most important job in the company. And I really resonated with that. We've seen people in all of our career, whether they are a mailroom, whether they are anything, if they take that seriously and if they are looking at how is my job affecting the overall, how this whole company is successful. And that resonated really well.
It's the Tom Sawyer effect.
It is.
Yeah.
That's exactly
That's
right.
what it is.
And it is amazing to that point. It is amazing how many employees you talk to, when they describe their job, they say, well, all I do is, or I only do this. And they don't have that connection of the importance that job really has to the organization. And so I think that's another tip for a great leader, is make sure you provide that connection, provide those breadcrumbs to how you can help make the organization successful, make people feel important.
And you have an anecdote about that in the book, right? About the guy who was sweeping the floors at NASA.
Yeah.
And somebody asked him, is like, what do you do here? And his answer was, I'm helping to put a man on the moon.
Right.
Right? Like, that was his attitude for it. yeah, one of the great like little lessons, little stories that I picked up in the book. So to give people a sampling or flavor as to some of the things that they can find inside of your writings here, if you wouldn't like, if each of you have a favorite lesson or one or two lessons, what are a couple of the lessons inside the book that you're particularly partial to that people ought to pick up and read that? That's the other cool thing about this book is that you don't have to read it from beginning to end. You can open it up, find the lesson that might resonate with you for that day, and read that little snippet and get it.
Some of the titles are absolutely great. If you know one off the top of your head that you want to talk about, go for it. And I just wanted to find some that were my favorite.
You know what? Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, my favorite one is sort of buried inside one of the chapters, and it's this concept of reframing. And reframing is you can take about any situation you're in, and you can look at it negatively, or B, you can figure out how to reframe it. And that all came from me traveling with the owner of Ditch Witch many years ago. And he was in his 70s. I was like 38 when I became CEO, so pretty young and pretty wide age difference. And so one of the first things he told me was, now, David, when we travel, I want a room together. And I went, okay. So anyway, we started, and you know, in hindsight, it was great because I got some great mentoring along that way. But first night, and it's in the book. It is one of my favorite stories. I woke up in the middle of the night, and he wasn't in his bed, and I could see the bathroom light was on, right? And the bathroom light stayed on for like 2 hours. I'm like, oh no, that can't be good, right? And so I was going to ask him about it. I think the reason he wanted to move room together was because he was getting older. I think he didn't have his wife with him, so I think I played wife for a little bit. Like something went wrong, I could take him to the doctor. So I didn't say anything next morning. Next night, same thing happens. 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, bathroom lights on for 2 hours, and I woke up and I said, are you okay? He says, oh yeah. I go, because if I need to take you to the doctor, I'll take you to the doctor. He said, no. He goes, I was just up reading. I'm like, reading? I go, Ed, you can read in your bed. I sleep like a log. You're not going to bother me. He goes, okay. And then I asked this question. I said, doesn't that just stress you out when you wake up and you know you can't go back to sleep? He goes, no. I go, why not? He goes, well, and he was a spiritual guy. He says, I always say a little prayer. He says, Lord, I don't know why you woke me up, but I'm looking forward to seeing what I can learn while I'm doing a little bit of reading here, right? And so that's called the art of framing, right? He reframed what most of us would consider negative. And that particular lesson is a lesson I still use every single day. And I probably reframe half a dozen things every day. And I'm so, as Brent calls it, my muscle memory, I exercise that muscle enough. I know how to reframe a lot of stuff, right? There's a few things that happen in my life that I can't reframe. I just don't have that skill there all the way. But I can reframe most stuff that happens.
If I could just chime in on that to give you kind of a simple example of that, that I think we talk about in the book. If not, we may need to do a sequel or a version 2 or something like that. But
I'm tired.
You're tired. I had a gentleman one time, and he was a president of a bank, and we were talking about this idea of framing. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean. We did something like that at the bank." And so I kind of leaned in. I was like, "What did you do?" And he goes, "Oh, we just changed have to get to."
Oh wow.
And I was like, "You did what?" And he goes, "Yeah. So we just made it part of the culture that if anybody ever says, I have to go take my son to soccer practice, somebody else in the organization stops them and says, no, you get to take your son to soccer practice. If they say, I have to go deal with this really upset customer, someone stops them and says, no, you get to deal with that upset customer because you get an opportunity to brighten their day." And I thought that is the most simple example of framing, but probably one of the most powerful things I've ever heard. And so that it doesn't have to be complex, right? But just sort of reframing something into something positive. You know, have to versus get to is one's an obligation, one's a privilege. And so, and I think that's exactly right. So just a great example of reframing.
So in looking at, the crowd that we are talking to today, many leaders, many people in roles that they've been in for a long time, and they are considered subject matter experts. many people looking to advance their careers, many people that are over large teams that are working on how they can get the best out of their team. And one of the things that I think we're all seeing more in 24 and 25 and 26, mergers and acquisitions going on, right? And one of the things that hit me really hard in the book was dealing with stress. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit just a few minutes ago, but how stress, number one, affects the body, affects your thought process, and it really kind of reconfigures who you are until you can really put that into the right place to how can I deal with this? How can I make the best out of the situation? And how can I be a very thoughtful person going through the process for the betterment of the team, right? And that was a huge part of the book. Now, I did say I was going to read a couple of these chapters. They're really phenomenal, and I'm not trying to be funny with them, but they do take a pretty humorous turn. One of them called "Have You Considered Shutting Up?"
Drew, have you?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm working. I need to reread that chapter. I think about the times that you would see on your Outlook another meeting pop up, and I think we've all been excited to go to meetings. We've all been not so excited to go to meetings. And there's one that said, "You can have a meeting that people don't hate," and that was another one that I really thought about, because I was like, sometimes you look at your schedule for the next week and you look at what's out there, and it's, well, I can't do anything on Tuesday because from 8 o'clock in the morning until 4:30, I've got back-to-backs. I don't know when I'm going to get lunch on Tuesday, but Wednesday's not too much better. I've got a few back-to-backs on those. Well, in looking at what David and Brent had put together of what is the importance of these meetings, who are in these meetings, how are you going to get a return on investment of that meeting? Because if you think about it, every person in here, we've got a salary. It's a high salary. You combine all of those, and even they talk about it in here, a CEO, I believe, that said, okay, we're having this hour-long meeting. I did the math, and this meeting itself is costing us X amount of dollars. Are we going to get that back by what we get out of it? And I thought that was just an absolutely really good way to go through it.
Yeah. So we were able to hear David's story or lesson. Brent, what about you? What's your favorite lesson from the book?
Oh gosh, I've got several. I think one of my favorites is, I can't remember exactly the title, but I think it's "Don't be in charge, be a Sherman." And I should say up front, that's not like a Sherman tank, and that's not what I'm implying. But it's a reference to one of my mentors in my career, a guy by the name of Sherman Black, when I was with Seagate. And that was my very first senior leadership promotion, working for him. And when I say senior leadership, I was now a leader in charge of other leaders, right? I wasn't just in charge of frontline employees. I was leading other leaders. And I can remember the first thing he said to me on the first day I reported to his office, and we were going to kind of talk about, the next 30 days, 60 days. And the very first thing he said to me, and he started off and he said, "Brent, you've got to know I will never promote you." And of course, at that point in time, my heart kind of, stops a little bit. But he finished and he said, "Until you've got somebody ready to take your place."
Mm.
And no one had ever framed that to me before. Yeah. Every other leadership position I had, the expectation is, okay, well, this department, this group has this outcome that you've got to create. There's this mission. You got to get these results. And I thought that was my entire job as a leader, was to achieve those results. And he was the first one, and I think he was spot on. That's not your entire job as a leader, right? You've got another really, really important job, and that is to create your bench, to grow those folks under you, so that when you move up, as you will if you're doing this right, there's not a vacuum left behind you. And so that was a great lesson that I learned from him, and I think that was a really a turning point for me in my leadership career, to understand that, okay, that's a big part of my job. That's a really big part of my job. And it bears so many dividends down the road, because not everything is coming to you. You don't have to do everything. You got a strong bench that you can.
That was one of the unique things that Brent and I had in common, because I'd never heard the Sherman story, but he told it one day, and I go, "Oh my gosh, that's what we did at Ditch Witch." And what I meant by that is, I would not, every leader had to have at least 2 people they were mentoring to take their place.
Mm.
So part of their job evaluation was, who are your two people and what have you been doing? Because I knew that when I became CEO, I was young. Everybody else was in their 50s and 60s. And I thought, my gosh, this thing's going to crater if we don't bring up the bench, right? So you have to constantly be kind of working on that. So I think Brent and I are 100% aligned that way.
I've heard that lesson. Like it's a fantastic lesson. The way it was worded to me once was always be training your replacement. And it's applicable not just in work. I mean, if you think about it, volunteer service, church service, even in your own family, you think about your kids. What do you want your kids to be doing? How do you want them to be running their own families or potentially your family someday?
Some of the recent research on that, they've done surveys of CEOs and boards, and something like 80% of them, their number one concern is lack of a good bench.
Right.
That if they look at what's going on in an organization, they think, I've got these people that are going to be retiring out, and I look around, there's no one there to replace them. No one there to replace them.
Yeah.
So it's a huge issue.
Okay, I got a tough question for you. And I think at some point, everybody in the room has probably experienced this. But not every person who has been promoted to the manager position was necessarily a leader. Sometimes they were promoted because they were the oldest or they were the most tenured, but they may not have those leadership skills. Yet you may be somebody who was on that team that is now taking orders from somebody who is your manager, but is not necessarily a leader. So what advice do you have for employees or team members that may in the future be caught in that trap or are currently caught in that trap, and they're trying to figure out, how do I manage up, or how do I help this person who is my boss actually become a leader?
Oh, you're stuck. I can't give you any advice for that whatsoever. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And not everybody, but I know our team has had a fair amount of experience trying to coach somebody that is, quite honestly, just not a great leader. So the advice I would give would be, that's a really critical conversation of leading up. It's your timing, your approach. Your approach has to be, I want you to be a great leader. That style, not you suck as a leader. You don't start there. You say, you can uncover blind spots. Don't act like they're an idiot. Say, well, you've got a couple blind spots. I mean, this is a very touchy kind of a thing. The coaching is easy because we're a third party and we can tell people what they need to hear. And we call it the velvet 2x4. And so we do that a lot. But if you're trying to lead up to somebody, Brent and I were side by side, but trust me, we will talk to each other about stuff that each of us needs to hear, right? And then for a second it hurts, and then you realize he's doing that because he loves me, and so I need to know that, right? So, yeah. But there are leaders that, I had a leader one time who was the head of engineering, and he was actually a really great guy, but he was not a good head of engineering, right? And so thankfully, this is what you want. He came to me and he said, I need you to demote me. He says, I can tell where you're going with this thing. He goes, I'm not sure I'm the right guy. So I'd like to go back to being this type of engineer and not running it. I mean, if it hadn't been weird, I'd have kissed him on the lips. I knew he wasn't the right guy. And he said, oh, and by the way, I need you to reduce my salary because I don't want to be out of line with the way we're paying other engineers.
Wow.
Holy moly. Just the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. That's what you want. You're never going to run into that. I'm just going to tell you, it was such an unusual situation.
Yeah. I think the other thing I would say on that, so I'll tell a little story about David. When him and his wife, Myra, before they had kids, you guys kept a list. And that list was, and I'm not going to use the word he used, but crap we will never do to our kids. And so as their parents would do things that like really drove them nuts, they would keep this list of, okay, we're never going to do this with our kids. I don't know how successful you were with that. But the idea there is sometimes you can learn a lot from a bad leader. You can learn a lot from a bad leader, even if it's stuff I will never do when I'm in that position, right? There's always a learning opportunity there. But sadly, that does happen a lot. People get promoted, the old Peter principle. You're a great engineer, so you'll be a great engineering manager. And that often doesn't work out.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a couple minutes about Magellan. So tell us what Magellan is. What does Magellan do? Do you work with individuals? Is it companies? Give us your pitch.
Yeah, we do all of those things. Like I said, we started out with strategic planning, and we do executive coaching. We do a lot of leadership development stuff. So we've got several leadership development programs. I can see out in the audience, I know some of you have been through some of those or some of that content. We do a lot of that. We still do a lot of strategic planning work and just helping organizations grow. Our mantra for many years has been we want to grow leaders worth following and build organizations that thrive. So we do, at any point in time, we're probably coaching about 100 leaders across the United States. Like you had mentioned, we've got a team of about 32 executive partners, all of whom are former CEOs, COOs, C-suite business owners, have run large things that maybe you're retired or want a little side hustle. They've got all this wisdom in their head that they want to give back, and so we give them that outlet to be able to give back, either through working with organizations or whatever. So anything that an organization needs to help it grow. About probably two-thirds of our work is with for-profit organizations. About a third, roughly, is with nonprofits. So it goes.
Most businesses, most leaders, people their worlds are complex. And so one of the things that and by the way, the 32 people that have been mentioned here, it was not that way up until about 10 years ago. For many, many years, it was just the Brent and David show. And I realized, crap, I'm going to age out of this thing, and the company's just going to die on the vine. Or B, we can start finding a way to grow it. And Brent and I had learned over the years that because of our prior positions, that we felt pretty comfortable talking eye to eye with another CEO, business owner, whatever that may be. So we're like, okay, if we're going to add people, let's add people that have similar kinds of positions. And so we're just a really good landing spot. And so people are like, oh, that's easy. I can just come, and literally the next day they can start being a good coach for somebody. But the main point of that is they have that skill of taking the complexity out of somebody's world, out of a company's world, whatever, and simplifying. The greatest skill you can learn as a leader is how to take really complex things and simplify. And I know people that do the opposite of that. They take really simple things and they try to make them sound incredibly complex because they think that makes them sound more intelligent. I'm like, no, that's the opposite in my mind. Whatever you describe to me, if it's too complex, I don't respect you that much as a leader. I want you to tell me so I can literally figure it out quick and I can take action on it pretty quick because you've simplified it. I know what I need to go do.
Speaking to all of the Magellan people that I've met and that I know and that I have passed with, all people that are so highly just revered in the community and in leadership positions and have a huge, and I think this speaks to everybody, have a huge passion for continuing and growing community and continuing and growing, making Oklahoma City and beyond, obviously, such a wonderful place. And so I really am a huge fan of Magellan and what they have done. And I hope that this has spoke a little bit to you, or has sparked a little bit of a just interest in that. And I hope you do check them out for sure. Are we at a time where we need questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's take some questions.
You may have heard about them. The Real Deal Landman slap bracelet. Yes, it's right here in my hand. If you ask a question, you get one of these slap bracelets. Now, what does this slap bracelet do for you? Aside from just automatically a fashion statement, it's one of the best in the industry, I've been told. But the other thing, and it was maybe I said it too quickly because I didn't understand how it was going to end up.
You were trying to bribe
I was trying to bribe
a fan base.
I was trying to bribe a fan base, and so number one, we didn't know how long this thing was going to last. Number two, I am, if nothing else, Drew Hopkins very committed to the bit, very committed to the bit. And so one time on one of our shows, I said, if you get a slap bracelet from Jerris or I or someplace, and then you find out that we're speaking at an event someplace, if you come up to Drew and you're wearing the slap bracelet, without question or hesitation, I would take my wallet out of my pocket, open it, and hand you any money that's in the wallet.
I want to make this very clear. This is if you approach Drew on this. If you approach Drew, he will do that.
It happened for the first time here today. And so if you need lunch bought for you, Liz has extra money. But I will tell you, she came up, she was wearing this, and she's like, I believe I get something for this.
Yes.
I couldn't have been happier. Like, I want that to happen more often. If you see me in, I don't know, like maybe Denver, Colorado, or Midland in a few months, I'm sitting on the side of the curb and I got my Real Deal Landman like little coffee cup because I've given out so much, I'll still be very happy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very, very happy that this has gone up. So if you have a question, please come up here. You got one. Fantastic. Go for it.
Hi.
Hi.
Let's see if it's on.
Yep.
Erica Honeycutt. I own a consulting and contract services business and a startup software company.
Okay.
Brent, one of the struggles that I've experienced throughout my career is identifying the right candidates for the bench, but the biggest hurdle is their lack of confidence that they're the right person for this. They have the skills, they have this, but because nobody has told them that this is even an option for them, or that they've decided that it's an option for themselves, I guess that those bench candidates feel like they belong there on the bench and then get promoted to that first string of it.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is hard because you can't get inside people's head necessarily and understand immediately, okay, they're going to be a great leader or they're not, and so it's very much a judgment call. But that confidence issue, Jack Welch, when he took over General Electric years ago, he had a mantra that he called his 3 S's, and his 3 S's were self-confidence, simplicity, and speed. And the idea is, if you don't have a self-confident employee, that person is not going to show initiative. They're not going to step up. They're not going to, question a bad decision, those sorts of things. And more importantly, they're going to overthink everything because they're not self-confident. So they're not going to be speedy, right? They're not going to be speedy. And they're certainly not going to be simple. And so I think you hit on a great point. And the good news is, as leaders, I think we're in a unique position to really help build people's self-confidence. And I think as we think of growing people, that's one of the aspects we need to help people grow. Because being in leadership, I mean, it's a sacrifice, right? It's not always, everybody kind of glamorizes it. There's a lot of bad things about being in charge, right? It's a sacrifice, and it takes great self-confidence to be able to do that. So just in terms of tips of how to do that, how we communicate, how we hold someone accountable, an accountability discussion where an employee has had a bad behavior, that doesn't have to be a negative conversation, right? If we embrace that as, man, I'm really going to serve this person by letting them know about something that's going to hold them back if they don't get it corrected, most people will really appreciate that. There was also, of course, I'm an engineer. That's one of the differences between Dave. He grew up in sort of marketing and sales. I grew up an engineer. So I always love studies and facts and figures and those sorts of things. And they've done studies of communication in organizations. And what they found was when they studied teams, the highest performing teams, the ratio of positive to negative communication is about 6-to-1. The lowest performing teams, that ratio is 1-to-2. So twice as many negative comments on why did you do this, why did you do that, as opposed to positive comments. And so I can guarantee you that 6-to-1 ratio is a much more effective tool for building self-confidence and growing people and those kinds of things than a 1-to-2 kind of approach. So a lot of that is how we lead. Now, the bad news is, and I've had several employees that were just wonderful employees that never could get over that hump. And so we're not in 100% control of that because there's a lot of factors that go into a person's self-confidence, right? But certainly as leaders, I think that's one of those areas where we should view part of our job as, man, I gotta get that into my team's veins. I gotta inject that into them every day. Because work is hard and they're doing great and we're growing, and even challenges are opportunities to be able to learn something, right?
One quick comment on that. Some leaders I run into get tired of complimenting their teams. And what I tell don't think of it as complimenting. You're reminding them of the behaviors you want to see repeated.
Mm.
And so if I worked with you and I saw you doing a behavior around something, I would come up and go, man, I love how you did that. That was fantastic. Well, guess what you're going to do? I'm going to repeat that, right? And so it's not about correcting the negatives. It's about, if you want to call it complimenting, it's really reinforcing the behaviors you want to see in the future.
That's the question. Anyone else?
My question is like, what is your thought on being a supportive leader versus being a micromanaging leader? And
So I have a lot of passion around how do you hold people accountable. So Drew's been to our office and has met our team. I don't know what the hell they do, okay? And what I mean by that is they know what they need to do, and I don't have to micromanage them at all.
right.
At all. And so the first thing we did is we make it, everybody in the organization knows what their goals are. And secondly, the way you want to set that up is whatever you need, and it can't be daily. Say, okay, once a month I need you to come in and tell me where you are and where you're going on these KPIs or whatever it may be, right? But you put it in their hand. Now, if they do that, you don't have to micromanage. You're only micromanaging if somebody's not doing what you asked them to do, right? I call those mentoring moments, right? So somebody's not aligned, I don't get mad. I go, let's have a little mentoring moment, come in, and we're going to talk about that. And I'll just keep giving them chances to kind of self-correct. But I guarantee our whole team knows how to hold themselves accountable, and we don't micromanage at all.
I think it's important to kind of look at that, just like a lot of things in life. If you think of a spectrum, on one end of the spectrum, as a leader, you're making every decision, you're micromanaging extensively, and on the other end of that spectrum, you're just providing support. And just like anything, there needs to be a balance between those two, right? But I think the key thing to keep in mind is micromanaging is the opposite of support. It's the opposite of support. When we micromanage for somebody, we're taking away the opportunity for them to learn and grow, and also help us with our capacity. And so that's not to say that sometimes you don't have to sort of jump in and get things done. We talked about the sacrifice of leadership, right? We're in a position as leaders, we can't be responsible for what our people do because we can't control them, but we are accountable for what they do. So if the team doesn't achieve a goal, we're the ones that are getting the phone call and have to explain that, right? If the team knocks it out of the park, we're the ones that have to say, man, it was all them. And so, sometimes we feel that pressure. It's like, I gotta step in and micromanage. And sometimes that may be appropriate, but I would always urge more and support. Don't think of the support as I never give you a bad comment. I'm always happy and you never do anything wrong. That's not what support is. Support is, for those of you that had kids, if your kids came and asked for help with their homework, you wouldn't just say, well, let me do it for you. That's not support, right? And you wouldn't say, well, the answer is 7. You would give them some tips. You would urge them, try to build their self-confidence. I think you can do this. I think you can achieve this, and let them go try again, and then sort of coach them in that process. And I think that's what we mean by true support, is how do we help people grow on that path? Great. That's a great question, by the way. I think, so when you do coaching with people, we have them do a strengths finder. Anybody here ever done a strengths finder assessment that kind of tells you, here's what your greatest strengths are? And as you can imagine, the engineer brain, my greatest strength is on the analytical side, the strategic side, those sorts of things. It's not on the people side or even the execution side. And so I as part of that, one of my blind spots has always been, man, I am a world-class overthinker. I am a championship level overthinker. You give me a problem, and if you don't give me a deadline, I will think about it for months and months and months, because I want to have engineers, everything is black and white, right? I want to have the perfect answer. And so that's one of those things that I continue to struggle with. It's a blind spot I continue to have to manage because of that.
Did you guys enjoy hearing from David and Brent today?
Yeah.
We are so thankful for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. This is what this podcast is all about. Somebody asked me, they were like, what's the difference between a panel discussion and a podcast? And I was like, well, way too many Amazon lights and Jerris' huge ego. And I was like, those are the two main differences. So we are fortunate enough to where we're just not doing this out of our own thing anymore. We've got a fantastic list of growing sponsors. If anybody wants to sponsor a podcast, we know a podcast. Hey, what do you know? What we try to do at any one of our live events is we always give away a bottle of bourbon. And it's so fitting this time because of the lessons from the patio, old-fashioned leadership. One of the stories you guys didn't go into was really how you came up with that book of after a long day's work, sitting on the back patio, making an old-fashioned and just talking about.
That's right. That's exactly how it happened. We would have a long day and we would compare notes at the end, not every day, but we would compare notes at the end of the day and we'd sort of like mentally or physically write down that's good content that we can use again. And so over the years, we just have all this. So writing a book, the content was easy because we had years worth of building it. And we were going to name it, and we had an editor that was helping us, write it so it sounded more like one voice. And we said, well, we need a name to it. No, the name will bubble up naturally as we go through the book. And somewhere about midway through, somebody said, how about old-fashioned leadership? And I'm like, it was just quirky enough. I'm like, my God, people are going to pick the book up just because it's got an old-fashioned on the front. So,
And the team at Magellan can make an old-fashioned, let me tell you. From experience, they can make an old-fashioned. Scramble, fantastic company that has just started on CRM and project management software. There's nothing like it. It's absolutely fantastic. Roland AI, you've heard a lot about this. That came out at NAPE not too long ago. AI is fantastic, and to know that there's something in the land space that could be a help for every person sitting in this room, amazing. Novus Consulting, I know them pretty well. Excellent, excellent, excellent group. And then Anchored Innovations. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate being there. This was a lot of fun. We'll see you next time. If you're into the whole please be Magellan, look up Magellan, find them on LinkedIn, and they're wonderful people to connect to. So thank you all again.